Everybody, welcome. It's a special edition of the Data Driven Daily Tip. I'm Paul Hickey, and I have a special guest with me today, Dave Isbitski. He's the chief evangelist for Alexa at Amazon. He's also a keynote speaker, podcaster, voice designer, and you can check out more about Dave at thedavedev.com. And Dave, welcome. We rarely have guests on the podcast, but you're the main man with Alexa. So could you tell us, actually, before we get started, could you tell us about the title Chief Evangelist? Because I think it's a cool title. How did you get that?
Oh, it's funny. It's oh gosh, like people going back. So I've been at Amazon 6 years, but it was at Microsoft 6, almost 7. So now this is going back 13 years. I was chief evangelist gaming when I was there too. And and for those that don't know me, it's funny because like I'm not big in titles at all. In fact, for when people find me on Twitter, the past 2 years it's been assistant to the regional manager, which is from Office Space, if you know Michael Scott and Dwight Schrute. And so it's basically, I'm just one of those really fortunate folks where I figured out what I loved doing and I had a passion for, and I've been fortunate to work with companies that thing. And so it's not like it's a role that's it's unique, right? It's always been unique. It's not like it's a PM role or a BDM role. I love, like you were talking about how many people in your agency, like I love small, scrappy startup kind of culture. And that's what the role basically is. So in the beginning, it was, I was employee one in the Alexa skills marketing. So it was figuring out, what is this thing even? I mean, I remember in 2014 looking at the first device, had it in my house, and I was like, wow, I'm talking to this a lot. And the whole idea of ambient computing, and back in 2014, everything, I mean, to go back in time, right? Everything was hashtag IoT, right? Like nobody was saying smart speaker or ambient computing. So back then it was like, what is this thing? How can we help people with this? And we knew early on that we weren't going to be able to teach Alexa everything. But when we launched, we did not have Alexa Skills Kit. We knew it was something we wanted to plan to do, but we didn't have it. And so a lot of that was figuring that out. So you'll see like early videos of me is just kind of like this, just turning on my webcam and just rapping with people, whether it was devs or brands. And even like, it was super cool to see enthusiasts. People are like, I've got an Echo, and they would come and ask questions. And so like, in my heart, I'm just a community builder. I'm a believer in long-term relationships. So for a lot of folks, I've been the same face for Alexa for them now for 6 years. Just empowering folks, right? Figuring out, if anything, it's like Tom Delaney from Blink-182 said this, is like, I'm a messenger. That's what I feel that I am too. I can like grok tech stuff, kind of figure out what does that mean for a normal human being. And that's all I'm good at, right? So whether that's on stage at a keynote or doing a podcast or doing social media, that's kind of the stuff. And so I've been fortunate that that's my role. And so lately it's been a lot of brand stuff. So you'll see me like helping brands figure out what does this all mean? It's not a smart speaker revolution. It's basically about connecting to your customers. Mm-hmm. And so it's conversational, right? That's really what this whole voice thing's about. But a lot of like in the internal Amazon stuff is like incubating new areas. So you'll see me a lot of Alexa for Business stuff, and other just, getting teams off the ground. And so I love it, you know.
That's awesome. That was one of the things that attracted me to you, was your high energy, and I could tell you're passionate about what you do. So
oh, thanks, man. And it's not just this about like Alexa, it's about everything. Like I'm one of those, if you look at personality types, like I have high enthusiasm, but I also have high assertiveness and like really high open to new experiences. So it basically means I find what's ever new and cool, and then I go tell everybody they should be doing that until I find the next new thing, right? So it's not just tech. But it's exciting times. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Really appreciate it. So one thing that you mentioned made me think of something I wanted to ask you, and that's the Alexa developers console and platform seems to be highly engaging in terms of encouraging and empowering developers to get into the platform. And I think you guys do a great job of incentivizing anybody really to learn how to build a skill. And you're very encouraging in terms of, like you said, building a community really is what it feels like to me. So before we get into kind of how businesses, I want to talk to you about how businesses can use Alexa, because I'm intrigued by Alexa for business. But before we get into that, maybe talk about how the Alexa developers community is coming along and what that's like to kind of build that out and incentivize people to be using the skills kit.
Yeah, I would say this in 2019. And so for those folks who don't know, an Alexa skills kit is basically you're teaching Alexa how to have a conversation about something. And so that is Ask or Alexa skills kit. We also have the Alexa voice service where you put Alexa into things. So you may have seen that. There's even Windows. There's I used to work on Windows 8 when I was at Microsoft, with the Windows Store. So there is a Windows Store app there that you can now talk to Alexa. It's on iPhone, Android, but there's also, Alexas in cars and stereos and refrigerators. So there's all of that. And basically a skill, just like, if we were going to have a conversation about something, there's a lexicon of terms. We need to know, like fitness, we need to know base metabolic rate and, what's our heart rate zone, so that kind of stuff, right? And so that's whether you are a developer or a brand or anybody. When I look at building a skill, I look at it as anybody should be able to teach Alexa about anything. And one of the things that I'm really excited about personally is probably in about the past 18 months, I think is when we launched it. If you go to blueprints.amazon.com, is you can actually create your own interaction with Alexa. And so it's basically a visual tool for creating a skill. And now you can share those. And so, for example, we did about 2 years ago where you could make Alexa remember things like what's my Wi-Fi password and, dad jokes, that kind of stuff. But now you can actually make a full conversation around making fun of dad, or like real stuff like how does the babysitter with your kids, like, what time do the kids go to bed? Ask the babysitter, or my parents are older. So like information that they may need to remember and things like that. Right. And then you can share those with other folks. And so that's blueprints.amazon.com. And then if you are a developer, or maybe you're a brand who has an agency that you're working with, I've been doing this for now, when did I start? Professionally, I started in 96, but I've kind of gone, as a kid, I did computing on Commodore and, even before DOS. And it's always been about the tech getting in the way, right? It was just trying to figure out a way a machine could get some type of input. And what's different now is that it's the first time we've had, there's two things, and I want you to think about this. Don't miss this, catch this, is that one, as a human being, you have the latest version. There's never been that. Right? Think about that. We've had even back in the day, you always had to upgrade Windows or DOS to use the latest stuff. Like people who have an Echo, like my parents still have the original one and they use it. My dad tells me about it, and he's not technical at all. He's never used a computer. And so that's always the latest version. And when you're a brand, it's like a brick and mortar store, right? Like you walk into a brick and mortar store, it's the latest version of that culture and what the company wants to say at any time. But tech's never been that way. And so that's what's super exciting about that space is it's that way. And then from the person who's creating this, you never have to worry about deploying that thing, right? And worrying about a different version to maintain. It's basically the maintainability of the web, but the discoverability of an app store and humans telling each other. Because it's like even when Twitter launched, they did a tweet with the skills, ask Twitter, right? So it's kind of like your marketing can just be, this is what you say. And also when you're creating this, at least in recent history, I've never been as a part of a platform where it's no longer about the technical side. Because this is the same, I mean, you've built a skill, so underneath it, and I like to just say this, is that think of voice like HTML. It's just a way of capturing the human voice into some programmatic way, right? Like it's just the interface. Nothing on the server side is changing. So if you've got web developers, guess what? Nothing's changed. You tap into the same API. If you've got mobile devs, it's the same API. If you've got client server stuff from 50 years ago and you've got an API, it's the same thing, right? It's the only thing that's changing is Alexa is having a conversation with a human being, and then deciding what APIs to call, right? And so there's no training for people. I mean, gosh, you think about 30 years of tech, right? Every time there's something new, you got to learn it. You got to train your devs. Like, I would talk to brands all the time, and they're like, yay, we get to learn an entirely new language or an entirely new way. Like, there's none of that now. So you spend most of your time just figuring out what's the right conversation. And that, to me, is where it should be all along, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And I think, so I think there's like this interesting thing also about the space that we're talking about with Alexa, where you have multiple levels of, to me, there's multiple levels of understanding what it is and what it can be. And it's exciting to be kind of figuring it all out, right? And so you being at the forefront of, you know, pounding the pavement, talking to people, being visible, trying things, understanding, you know, what it can be and what it's going to be. I'm excited to kind of get your take on a few different things. And one of them is related to an article that you posted a link to on LinkedIn maybe a couple months ago. And it was basically talking about some data around how the amount of users have increased, the amount of skills have increased. It came from business.com, I think. And it also kind of alluded to, you know, it had some data points in around like the amount of active users on Alexa enabled devices versus the previous year and things like that. And so I'm wondering, just like in the process of educating our audience, small business owners, mid-level marketing, mid-level company marketing teams, small marketing teams, they're always dealing with the challenges of, I think they're always kind of catching up in terms of their digital strategy. My experience is that everyone's still trying to figure out how to grow their audience, and that's always changing. And so we think about frictionless and we think about audience attention. And so how would you describe the current landscape of the voice space and Alexa, and building, say, an Alexa skill or an Alexa flash briefing skill? How would you kind of describe it to a small business owner who's still trying to wrap their mind around like all the things that they need to do on a daily basis and their website and their social media strategy? How would you describe to them how this device or this platform or other platforms like it can help them conduct their business or grow their business?
Yeah, you know, it's been the same way through everything, through when web came out and I got to work on that. I used to work at macwarehouse.com, which competed with amazon.com back in like 96, and you know, doing mobile and just, you know, a small business it's running its own business. Why should it care about tech? Right? It's just another thing. Why should it care about social media? I mean, you care about customer acquisition and retention, and right. And so what I tell people, whether it's, and by the way, yes, I work for Amazon and on Alexa, but this is bigger than all of that. This is the way that human beings are going to be interfacing with the technology around us moving forward. It's not a smart speaker revolution. It's a human being revolution. I like to think about it, and it's inclusive. So it's not, oh, you've got the latest phone and you know how to install apps, you get to interact with us. No, it's just talk to us, which is what companies want anyway, right? We just haven't been able to give them that in the tech field. And so the way I say is like, look, don't look at this as new customer acquisition, although there are certainly devices out there. We do, just to give you some numbers, like we announced there's over 100 million Alexa-enabled devices. There's over 80,000 skills now. You know, hundreds of thousands of developers using it. 3 out of 4 people in the US have used the skill. So you're seeing that momentum, but I think that'll just take care of itself naturally across everything, because if you've ever used a device like this, you know, it's, as we are in human beings, we just get used to stuff, the way that we build up the neural pathways. You know, when you give a piece of glass in front of you now, you want to tap on it because you're used to your phone and your tablet. Just that switch will happen to you, by the way, when it comes to voice. So you'll be traveling in a hotel and you'll say Alexa or another assistant and she's not there. Or you'll be in the car and say, so there's something very powerful. It becomes the first choice to do things because nothing's faster than just asking for that. And so what I would tell a company like that is know your customer. You know, if you know that your customers they have smart speakers at home like this, or they're starting to use this, hey, we're starting to see skills. You could just order stuff, just eat. And even Domino's, you could do, we have Friday night pizza night here in my house. And so I'll just say, ask Domino's for my easy order and you're done. Right. So there's something very powerful, but also for small businesses is just having a conversation without talking to someone, but you're talking to that brand. So I could say, hey, what's your specials this week? Or what was that thing I ordered from you 6 months ago? Mm-hmm. Right? Do you have anything like that now? It's all the stuff that when you build these applications, I like to think of them as on-ramps. And so what you're doing is you're forcing a human being to try and think the way that you've actually coded a computer. Mm-hmm. And that's really not what you want. You want to actually hear from your customer in the moment what's on their mind. Yeah. And, that's where this changes. And in fact, we're seeing all sorts of companies that are now, they're looking at skills, the actual ratings of what people are asking for. I mean, Capital One did that with car payments, just showing up, then people asking, and so that is the huge thing. One is if you don't have that, like if you're a company that grew up on the internet, maybe you don't even have a help desk. Maybe it's just email support. You've never talked to your customer. So what would they say if they could ask anything, And I mean, that's the reason this even putting stuff in when you get it, works with Alexa certified. We're not charging for any of this. The idea here is that it's just like you wouldn't charge for HTML, right? It's about making tech easier for everyone to use and inclusive. And when you do that, I mean, Amazon will benefit, the whole industry will benefit, we'll all benefit. Yeah. And so it's just this natural flywheel, I think. And you start to see that move across all things. And so what will happen is, even as a small business, voice shopping is another thing that you'll see on the rest. So if somebody's on their phone, they're going to do it. But it's all about speed, right? Nothing's going to beat speed for voice. Yeah. And even I've started to see things like you'll walk in, maybe you have an area in an actual store where you can see things, and so now you can just ask, right? Versus you'd be surprised. I mean, and my, not to pick, I'll pick on my my wife a little bit because she's not here, but she's always been a huge see if she can hear me. She's always been a huge germaphobe, which I love about her. But so she'll not touch like a kiosk, right? Because other people have touched it. But voice isn't. You're not touching anything. Yeah. You're just asking and you're having a conversation. And so it's I remember, here's a little anecdote. It was like 2014 or 2015. I won't say the airline, but it was a huge airline contacted me, head of their technology, and was like, we just rolled out a system on iPads. And when you do that, right, like there's a learning curve. And so there's always that expert that knows how to do it, so it's like you're trying to book a customer. It's like, hey, so-and-so, how do I get to the booking screen, blah, blah, blah. And so they were like, we just want a whole bunch of echoes. Because that becomes, so it's like these scenarios in business are, you might see something like that. I saw that when computers were just starting to get into stores and they would have like Macs or early PCs, and people were like, I have no idea how to use this accounting software to like check you out. Right. And then there'd always be the person going, oh, well, you have to hit F10. And then you'd see like the keyboard shortcuts. And I've starting to see, smart speakers like that, even inside little stores, as a way to figure stuff out. 'Cause you're just talking.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we have some clients that have, retail locations, like a convenience store that has like 70 locations around Middle Tennessee. And so, talking to them about, okay, Alexa's in cars now. So imagine a skill where, they can just, people while they're driving can just ask instead of opening up Waze or opening up Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever. And they can just talk about, where's the nearest, convenience store, where's the nearest gas station.
And you see what makes me excited about car? Yeah. Because we've had that, right? Yeah. I had that on my phone 10 years ago. What's different is this is not an app. You're not running your phone in the car. The car just becomes another way for you to talk to the AI in your life that you already have an existing relationship with. So therefore, that AI is connected to everything else. So in the case of like example with Alexa, like when we're driving back from the airport on vacation, in my car, I have a little Garmin Speak. This is just a little Alexa device. I've had it for years. And I'll just say, Alexa, set home to 70 degrees, right? Mm-hmm. And then that hits my thermostat at home. I could say, show me the front door and you'll see if there's any packages there. right? If I'm on the screen. So it's everything is connected and integrated. So it's not just the scenario of, because I don't think people, you always see it in the commercials, I don't think people get in a car and then ask the car where to go eat. Because it's such a conversation, for, especially my family. What do you feel like? Right? You have that beforehand.
Yeah.
But what, like, here's a super cool scenario in the car. I think this is going to be huge. So when I'm driving a lot, I go through tons of podcasts and audiobooks, which you could just ask for, right? And it works really well. But what I've also found is you could play games. And it's a perfect scenario. Like, I'm a big gamer at home, so I'm on console and big screen or PC. But like in the car, the types of games that you were playing can also be family oriented. So you can be playing Jeopardy, or you can be even like I was playing Skyrim in the car. And there's just enough brain power, like you're watching the road, but it also, because there's a point, like if I got a 7-hour drive, like to get to like Philly to Pittsburgh is long. People don't realize how far Pennsylvania is. You may, and the types of podcasts and audiobooks I listen to are very cerebral sometimes. So it's like your brain gets to a point where it's like, all right, silence, music, or I want a game, right? Like you just need to detach. And so I found that impactful as well. But none of that existed. Like, how are you going to play an app game before? We never had that, right? And so this is, all of those skills are still there, all of the integrated content and media that you have, and then all of the rest of the integration across all the tech in your life, you now have that in the car, which I think makes it super powerful.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point in that it can all be integrated into everything else that you're doing. It's not just the voice experience, it's the entire experience. So thinking about something like wanting to order something through like a custom software application, I think of like a B2B scenario where we have a pharmacy down in Florida that we work with, and we built their system for their offices. They're a veterinary pharmacist, and their veterinary offices order prescriptions for their clients. And so like a refill ordering system where it's just getting businesses to understand that like you can have a vet tech walk by, reorder something, and it's not just with Alexa. It's also integrated into that software application. They're getting the email, they're getting the validation that it's actually there. And so I think like for someone like you, I mean, it's interesting to get your perspective on just the like boots on the ground, like simple stuff that I don't know that people understand, that it's more than a device that plays your music. It's more than a device that can order you a product, but it's an integrated experience. Like you talk about playing games, all of that kind of stuff. So I wanted to ask you about, this kind of leads perfectly into my question. So I've read some stuff about like Mark Cuban saying that if he were to start a business now, it would be a Google Home action or an Alexa skill. Now, in your opinion, can an Alexa skill or a Google Home action or whatever, and maybe you can help our listeners understand the difference, can that be a business, or right now is it an extension of or integrated into a pre-existing product or service-based business? What's your take on that?
I would say, I hate giving this answer, it depends, but it really does, because that's like asking me in 95, could I make a business on the web, right? And my answer would be, well, what are you selling? Because, right, even Jeff said, I started with books because that's what people were willing to buy through the internet, right? And so what's your customer base like? We certainly have APIs for it. And let me give you some interesting scenarios. And so one, you can use your existing retail system. So we have something called account linking. So that's like how Domino's works, right? Is that I already have a Domino's account. I'm already logged in. I just say it, and they're charging through their own system, right? Another way is Amazon Pay integration. So if you've ever done Amazon Pay, and you see that with small businesses selling things online, a customer logs in with their Amazon account and they see the Amazon login screen and all of that. So you can do that, and then everything's already set up through Amazon, all of the payments and things like that. What's interesting about that is meeting your customer in the moment is super important there. So like, let's say I have a podcast and we're talking about running shoes, and I could on my podcast say, would you like to buy these running shoes right now for 50% off on Amazon? And what do I have to do as a customer? I just have to say yes. Yeah. Right. And it's already linked up. It's super fast. I mean, you could do things that way. There's the whole model. The mobile model is kind of crossed over into Alexa too, that whole 70-30 split. So there is some of that, like if you're going to do an in-skill purchase, which people are used to. So like if you have a game and you want to do power-ups, Jeopardy does this, so you can get more turns. That type of stuff's available as well. But I think for most people, especially a small business, it's about knowing your customer. Like, let me give you an example of this, because if, let's say you're a type of small business where your clientele happens to be an age that skews higher. And so maybe in the past that you weren't able to fulfill a lot of web or mobile orders just because of the tech barrier. So you wind up having to support all of these calls. And maybe you have a huge volume of calls and it's this huge cost center for your business. When in fact, if they could just talk to you and order stuff, that would completely solve it, right? So that in that scenario, that's a moneymaker right there for that type of business as well, right? And so again, it's know your customer, like all things. And what's really interesting about this is you get to know your customer more. So we give like free analytics, like stuff called interactive path analysis, IPAs and stuff like that. So like even one of the first little skills I did just to like show people was a Dungeons and Dragons dice roller. And so what's super interesting, what do you think happens when you put a D&D dice roll? So you could say roll a 20-sided or roll a 6-sided, whatever. If they've never used it before, so this is what the IPA showed me. If they've used it, the skill before, they say, roll a D20 and it's done. But if they've never used it before, they get the message of the type of die that they can roll and they roll it. And then 98% of people, you know what they do? They roll again. And so I have hard data on that, and I get to see that, and I can pull it up at any time. And so it's people in the moment when they're doing that. To me, that means they're experimenting, right? They want to see what it's like, and I'm going to go ahead and just roll all these different dice because it feels cool too to roll a die. You hear the sound, and it's me with my dice on my desk. And it's a free skill, so it's not like it's anything they had to purchase. But that I think is interesting because what happens is when in the beginning, it becomes exploration, but once you've used it, it becomes utility. And so that becomes my go-to, much like saying, turn the home to 70 degrees or play this piece of music. You know what you can do and how quick you can do it. And so that's what I advise people now is to start figuring that out, man. Like if your customers wanted to ask you anything, like where do they want? Because right now, all the data you have is from what they were given. So it's,
right.
It's the top 3 things all customers do daily in my mobile app is this. And it's like, yeah, that's probably not what they wanted to do. It's what they were given, and that's what they're winding up doing. And you don't want that. You always want to be listening to them and making it better. So that, I think, in and of itself is worth doing stuff for now. And then, you start to figure that over time. Even customer retention is good because if you have a customer that is using these types of devices, and they can just reorder stuff or they can get stuff from you even quicker, right? You always retain customers if you're providing a quality product, but you're also doing it very quickly.
Yeah.
That's why I started doing mobile banking, by the way, with a certain bank. And some people are like this, like years ago, I switched to a different bank because they had a better mobile app. It was faster.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, and I just want to ask a question just to clarify this for our listeners, because obviously we're all about the data at data-driven design, so we like to understand, we like to make decisions based on data. But you make a good point, and we live in Google Analytics, we live in a lot of